And next up on Breaker Throw, it is the greatest player of all time, the 16-time champion of the world, Phil Taylor. Let's hear how he throws a dart.
Hi, I'm Phil the Power Taylor, and this is my throw breakdown. Okay, so what I do, I visualise the treble 20. So actually, Steve Davies taught me this one. When you walk into the shot. So when he was on a snooker table, he'd look at the shot, keep his eyes on the shot, then walk in with your eyes peeled on that shot. Then pick it up, aim, and then pull back and fire. But always follow through.
Interesting to hear Phil talk about that sort of pre-shot routine, that the throw actually starts before he even gets to the hockey. Is that something that you think is important? Is it something you do yourself?
Yeah, you're obviously always thinking ahead. You obviously you know what you're going to want to go for, and you know kind of what you want to do. But it's interesting hearing it from Phil, because I think, you know, when Phil used to play, you know, it was very intense. You could see him staring down that board, and actually hearing him talk about it now, I kind of understand where that intensity came from. Because as a player, it's not something that I've ever really done or really even thought about. So, you know, perhaps something that a lot of us can take away from this, because, you know, arguably the best player that's ever existed.
Yeah, I did find it strange that he said he would needed to visualise the treble 20. It's right in front of you, Phil. Just have a look at it.
Yeah.
I hold my darts further back, near the stem, where a lot of players hold theirs a bit more forward. So I'd walk into the shot, get my foot, and align my arm so it's level with the treble 20. So my foot, my right foot, would just be to the left of the centre of the hockey, which you get used to when you do it all the time.
It does seem like a really constructed process, and this is the greatest player of all time. You would think immediately natural talent, but this seems very well rehearsed, very well constructed.
Yeah, I don't think it's any secret. I mean, Phil Taylor used to kind of treat the darts like a job. You know, get up, read a paper, a couple of hours on the board, have lunch, a few more hours on the board, and he very much treated it like that. So, you know, it was an actual process and something that he worked on. And I think, again, yeah, you have natural ability, but when you get to that elite level, when you get to that top level, I think that is where you really need to work on just the small nuances that can actually, you know, separate you from the rest of the pack. And let's be honest, that's what Phil Taylor did when he was at his prime.
Yeah, loads to unpack there, actually. First of all, spoke about where he holds the dart on the barrel further back. Is that what causes the stacking?
Maybe, yeah, absolutely. Again, I'm very much a believer of when the natural stuff comes in when you pick up a dart, and that's what feels good to you, and that is what you've got to kind of stick with and work with. You can look at equipment and other bits as you go along that process, but yeah, holding it slightly back, he was synonymous with the stacking system, wasn't he? And used it to great effect. So perhaps just holding it that further back, you know, it's obviously then heavily weighted forward when he's throwing it, and it's something that he's, like I say, he's just practiced and worked on.
And also foot position for Phil Taylor was pretty much side on, horizontal, and I suppose that gets him closer to the dartboard. Yeah,
and I think that is kind of what most players will do. They'll have that side on stance. You can be really heavily weighted, because the one thing you don't want to do is be moving. You know, once you're stood side on and you kind of rock solid in that in that right leg, that is when you can kind of like forget about the bottom half of your body. Once you've got that position right at the bottom and you know where you're going each and every time, then you can work on the mechanics at the top.
Then pick it up, aim, pull back and follow through. And it's the follow through that's important. It's like when you're hitting a golf ball. If you try and hit it too hard, the golf ball will do this. So it's all about following through, and do it as if you're cutting a knife through butter. It's easy. There's no effort into it, and that's the way I did it.
Take the butter out of the fridge first, I think, to make it easy. But look, the follow-through is a really important part of a player's throw, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's, you know, there are some players, and actually, you know, I'm here for Women's Week at the moment, and Lorraine Winstanley probably is one of those players that's at the top of a game, but actually doesn't have a massive follow-through. But I would say for the majority of players, you know, that kind of, that nice flow, getting your arm, and when you let go of the dart, you want your hand to be pointing in the direction of, you know, where it's meant to be going. It sounds obvious, and Phil said, you know, it's easy. I mean, he made it look easy. I promise everyone it's not as easy as he made it look, but that comes from practice.
Do you immediately know when you haven't thrown a dart properly?
Yeah. absolutely. And you know when one feels good as well. We see it so often, don't we? Like when we're commentating, that someone will actually throw a dart and walk because it feels that good that they think it's gone into the double. So yeah, that's when you know that you've got everything kind of right, the release and everything that goes with it. And it does come from that extension, that follow through.
First of all, you've got to get muscle memory. So that comes with practice. So your arm, my arm sometimes used to pick my arm up, and if it wasn't right, my arm would move itself into the right position. It's ever so weird. When it does it, you know then you practice that much that your muscle is used to that position. It's a bit like when you drive a car now, when the car moves off the white line. It's ever such a strange feeling.
It's ever so strange.
Muscle memory, is that something that you believe in, something you've experienced?
I haven't experienced it to the level that Phil was describing. Yeah, it is definitely something that we all talk about and something that we recognise in the sport. And it comes, again, from just extensive practice. But I don't really know that there are many people out there, especially at the time when Phil was at his peak, that actually practice as much as Phil Taylor did. As I say, there's a lot of lessons that can be learnt from the fact that, you know, if you put in the effort and you practice and you do it again and again, then that is when you can actually, you know, really hone the skill and get the best out of yourself.
I mean, you mentioned how much he practiced, how long he was dedicated to the sport. Do you experience maybe when you don't throw a dart for a while that you pick them up and it doesn't feel so familiar?
Yeah, absolutely. I've actually picked up my darts. It's no kind of, it's a bit of a known fact that I had a massive hiatus, obviously young children, family, go back to playing it, and yeah, you pick them up and you don't even sometimes know how to hold them. It all just feels really alien. So it is really important, and it's a point that that we've made recently, especially with, you know, PDC and the MODUS Super Series and all the opportunities that we're now getting in the women's game, that yeah, we will practice like 2-3 times a week and make sure that you just keep it going. Haven't quite got the time, you know, to do it every single day, and I think that's the same for a lot of players. But yeah, it's just building on the skills you've got and just making sure that you just keep your arm, keep your arm in, and just make sure you get some regular practice.
And something that Phil himself always did was tinker with the equipment. So let's hear him talking about that.
And then it's about get the right dart and the right weight that goes right by that treble, either above it, underneath it, or in it. So you've got to be, if you're down at 22 gram and it's dropping down, try 23 gram. If that goes further down, go to 21 gram or 20 gram. And that's what I did. I used to experiment. I had loads of darts when I first started until I found the right one.
And we saw that throughout his career as well. Phil Taylor would make these tiny little changes just to try and get that extra half a point on his average. He was always striving to improve, and the mechanics of the throw he'd worked out, so what he threw did change over time. A lot of dart players would never change their darts. Who's right?
It's that big question, isn't it? I mean, whenever I think of tinkering, I think of like, you know, synonymous with someone like Peter Wright. And yeah, you do have players that are just not quite satisfied. They always think they can get that extra point, that extra 0.5% out of themselves. And, you know, I don't think anyone's kind of right or wrong. I think when you do make the decision to change your equipment, yeah, keep doing it until you find what you like. However, you need to kind of stick by it for a little while. I think the danger sometimes, especially if you're a more established player, is as soon as you start tinkering around them, you still keep your old faithfuls in the bag, and then you kind of think, oh, these aren't going so well, so I'm going to go back to the old ones. Then the old ones don't go well, and then you think, oh, I'm going to try something else, and you can end up in that vicious circle. I mean, I'm probably the worst one to speak to because I spent 15 years playing with 2 darts the same and an odd one because I just wouldn't change what I was doing. And I'm very much, you know, I've got my own darts, but I will stick to the same used set. I don't like cracking open a new set of darts, whereas other players love the feeling of a nice fresh set. It is what works for you at the end of the day, but I would say, yeah, experiment, explore, but just commit.
Yeah, as a beginner, you need to find the right set, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, when you're starting out in this sport, I think, you know, there's so many darts on the market as well, and you've got different flights, different shapes, and they change the way that your darts fly through the air. So, you know, I cannot throw with a pear-shaped flight. It just clatters on the board. You know, I'm no John Lowe in that instance. However, yeah, you just work out what's good for you, and then maybe just make those small changes. And I think that's what Phil was saying. He made small tweaks. You know, went up a gram, down a gram. Then, you know, you can kind of build off that. But like I say, if you make the decision to change something, you just need to commit to it for a while.
And practice makes perfect.
Me, when I'm at the hockey, a lot of people use their foot, put it right to the side, like this. For me, it feels really uncomfortable. As I move forward, I feel like I can't. So for me, I'm much more of a front-weighted person. with my front foot. I lean into it. I like to think about 60-65% leaning into the throw. And then my back leg comes right out. Quite unbalanced in a way, really, but I feel much more, compatible to do it this way.
Laura, there you said the word unbalanced, which doesn't seem sort of orthodox, does it, for a player of his ability? And also that foot facing forward. Not many players do that.
No, so when you step to the hockey, if you actually place your foot like to the side, I think what you've got is that slight advantage of being slightly closer, or at least players feel like they're slightly closer. And as Luke mentioned there, you do have a real steady balance if you can really weight that front foot when it's sideways on. However, the key thing that I noticed from what Luke was saying is how he is comfortable. And I think if anyone's looking at their own throw, that is the main thing. It's how you are comfortable. With Luke, with his toe up front, what he's doing is he's lining up his whole body in front of the dartboard. And I think, it's very conducive to having that straight throw, which obviously, is synonymous really with Luke Humphries and the way he plays.
Yeah, and it may be that he compensates in other areas. For example, he stands a little bit further back because of the position of the foot, but he throws a really long dart, doesn't he?
Yeah, and like you said, he actually says like feeling unbalanced, but because he has that lean forward, it kind of counteracts with the back foot being out as well. So yeah, and like I say, for me, I think every dart player needs to just look at what's comfortable for them. But as we say, I think a lot of players will actually have their kind of foot parallel to the hockey, because you just feel like you've got, you're just weighted down slightly more, and also you're just that little bit closer to the board.
Arm comes back. Can't have it on eye level because it would brush my eye, and I couldn't do that. So it's just gently off the right a little bit as I bring it back, and then it just push through.
So just looking at that reference point for Luke Humphries, he mentioned Gary Anderson's one that springs to mind, used to bring it right into the eye. He then started wearing glasses. You wear glasses, so is that something that you've had to think about?
Yeah, because when I started, didn't wear glasses. So yeah, definitely have to kind of allow for that, because if you are that player that brings it up and puts it here, then yeah, you're going to clatter into your glasses, absolutely. And it's something that Luke's obviously compensated for in terms of how he throws. Everyone, like I say, everyone's throw is slightly different, but again, for me, the way that Luke stands, coupled with the way he's throwing, it's very much, everything's just lining up for him.
And again, it's a release you have to get right, because he spoke about he's bringing it here, but his arm's actually coming off to the side before going forward to release it straight. So there is a few mechanics that he has to get right there.
There are more mechanics in the throw of darts than I think people actually understand. I mean, you break it down really simply and you're just throwing little bits of metal at a board. And I've always said the same thing. But when you start looking at the technicalities, and when you're at the level of like a Luke Humphries, where, the tiniest adjustment could make all the difference, that's why he's world number one. He's obviously analysed his own throw. He knows what he's doing and how he's doing it. And it's really interesting to hear, from him, how he feels about how he's throwing.
And I make sure that when I'm throwing that dart through, I flick it up. I flick that dart up and flick it, because I want it to come up heavy, high. So I want that dart to, sit high on the board, and that allows me to score as heavy as I do.
Another thing that he said, he's using words that you wouldn't associate with a top quality dart player. He mentioned unbalanced before. He also said he flicks the dart. There's a little flick of the wrist as he throws. What do you think the thinking behind that is?
Well, he said he wants it, he kind of likes it heavy and high. And you have players, for me, if a dart lands on the top of that treble 20, I find it really hard to get one underneath. Mine is very much more, I'm able to stack it if it goes underneath. Whereas for Luke, from the sounds of it, he likes it to go high, and then he can work his way into the treble if the first one's not in there anyway. So you do, the way your dart lands very much denotes how you like that first dart to land.
And those players that do that sort of flicking motion, you often see them speed up through the throw. So if the first dart's high in the treble 20, the next two are gone, because they just have to kind of flick it in without even thinking, don't they?
Yeah, we kind of refer to them as first dart merchants, don't we? It's that kind of thing. And that comes from just practice, understanding how your darts land, the way you're throwing them. And it is a lot of mechanics and a lot of technical stuff that actually you work on over the years. And for someone like Luke Humphries, when you see the progress that he's made throughout his career, obviously now world number one, it's something that he's been really aware of and really worked on.
I always want to ask people this question. Have you ever tried to throw like Luke Humphries?
Maybe not like Luke, but there are some, I think there's some kind of standout unique throws that I would always try. And quite often I sometimes stand up there and throw left-handed, just not with a chalker that's anywhere near the vicinity, because they might be in trouble.
That's how to throw like the world number one.